Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today another late night edition as we are discussing the final American World Cup of the season, the second round of the World Cup to be precise, in Fayetteville, Arkansas. With me here to do that, as he has already been for the entire season, is Issam. Issam, thank you for being here once again.
Yes, thank you for having me. Thank you.
We were treated with two very entertaining races today in Fayetteville. Let's start with the men's race. The start was unfortunately disrupted by an incident with Pim Ronhaar. His chain snapped, he fell back, and he unfortunately never was able to get into the front positions of the race again. Unfortunate for the young Dutchman. But already in the first lap, it was Iserbyt taking the lead. The first lap was a wrecking lap. We had, I think, 25 riders crossing the line together after the first lap. But then Toon van der Bos attacked. And after that attack, there was no immediate reaction. Iserbyt eventually closed it. And this was really how it was going for a long time in the first half of the race. There was a rider attacking, and most of the time Laurens Sweeck needed to close it. Sweeck, who did have a good start, unlike in Molenbeek and Waterloo, was riding quite alert. He was leading the race quite a bit, whilst Pauwelshuizen, they needed to resort to some team tactics, and not on a small scale. At every opportunity they got, they tried to put the pressure on Laurens Sweeck, who needed to solve it. He closed gaps a couple of times. Sometimes he was helped by riders like Eric Brunner, but ultimately this running and chasing and then stopping and halting led to the situation we had with 3 laps to go. We had a leading group of 11 riders, and Toon van der Bos attacked on the start-finish straight once again, just like he did after the first lap. There was no immediate reaction, but once Iserbyt reacted, Laurens Sweeck was out of position. This was the first time in the race. Iserbyt used this opportunity to overtake Toon van der Bos on a very aggressive manner. Toon van der Bos needed to get his shoulders out, there was contact, and ultimately Iserbyt had none of that. He didn't mind. He just kept on going, barging straight forward, up the climb, attacking. Only Van Toerenhout was able to follow. At that point, many people thought the race was over, including myself. But Sweeck managed to come back. Van Toerenhout, who was in the wheel of Iserbyt, then just as Sweeck was about to rejoin the lead, let the gap fall. He was trying to hold up Sweeck, but Sweeck passed Van Toerenhout and ultimately closed the gap. This led to 3 leaders in the final lap, who were being chased by Eric Brunner. Brunner unfortunately never managed to close the gap to Van Toerenhout, Sweeck and Iserbyt. Iserbyt launched a big attack up the final steep climb in the final lap, which led to Van Toerenhout being dropped. Sweeck, however, was able to follow that attack, which eventually led to a sprint. Sweeck felt that he was the strongest and started the sprint from very far out up the hill. Through the So Nice section, he launched the sprint properly, but ultimately just got reprimanded on the line. Iserbyt taking his second win of the season and denying Laurens Sweeck his first ever World Cup win. Quite an interesting race, Issam. A lot happened. Where should we start? I think we should start with the beginning of the race. Laurens Sweeck finally getting a good start, but you could see that he was constantly being terrorized by Pauwelshuizen. Iserbyt and Van Toerenhout were really going at it. At every opportunity they had, they pulled the team tactics. Sweeck needed to be super alert throughout the entire race.
Yeah, we discussed it before that for Sweeck, if he wants to have a shot of winning a race, everything needs to go right. And he definitely went into this race with that intention of making sure that if he lost the race, that it wouldn't be, a fault because of not paying attention or some team play. And, he was on the wheels of Iserbyt and Van Toerenhout from the start. Like you said, the start was very good. He placed himself well. And he made sure that even though there were some tactics played for the majority of the race, he was always aware, he was always alert. He made sure that Iserbyt had to do his work. When they played the tactics in the descent or on the hills, he was able to always close it down. Really, really good race from Sweeck. Like, in all honesty, it's also a race that I haven't seen from him in a while. He was super aggressive and he looked very good. And I think that is definitely... we had seen already in the beginning of the season that we saw some great signs actually from him, but every time there was something going on, and today it seems that it all came a bit together. He was riding perfectly in a way. Obviously, in that 7th lap, the one time he wasn't ahead, the two guys from Pauwelshuizen put him under pressure, and he needs to close the gap again. And then you know, with such a gap, you can always make the mistake of panicking and closing it a bit too fast, and then you kind of lose your shot at the end of the race. And I think he did that also very, very good. Like, he made sure that he didn't bridge that gap, he didn't panic, he didn't bridge it that quickly, and he made just sure that, you know, if he's going to arrive there, he's still going to have the energy to make sure that he can finish well. And finishing well, he did, but yeah, then in the sprint, obviously, he came a bit short.
Sweeck, in my opinion, was super alert, and yes, he took quite some initiative, and to be honest, there were a bit of doubts about that, but I think he was in the only position that he could be in the lead. We already saw a couple of times that at every opportunity Powershauser got, they rigorously pulled the team tactics card. That's up to them. Where last week I thought Iserbyt was super strong, and if he would be able to replicate that today, there would really be no starting it for the other riders. He wasn't as strong as last week today. He really had to fight for it. Sweeck was arguably a bit stronger than last week as well. And that really meant that Powershauser couldn't rely on the pure strength. They had to use their collective strength, which they did. And eventually it worked for them. But if Sweeck was going to sit in the wheel, then he's just waiting for one of the Powershauser riders to pass him, which they tried multiple times, sometimes even on places where you wouldn't expect it, like Van Toerenhout tried it in the final lap. He even tapped the wheel of Iserbyt in downhill. Well, not the wheel of Iserbyt, but the wheel of Sweeck, of course. So by taking the lead and not necessarily pacing hard, he at least had the margin that if one rider passed him, he would be able to still be in the wheel of that Powershauser rider. And it's a super difficult position to be in, because for the entire race you could see that the pressure was on Sweeck. And exactly as you say, the one time he was out of position, it almost got punished. And I personally didn't expect him to come back. And when he closed the gap the first time, then I thought, well, this might be a bit of a mental hit, but I want to wait a bit. And then we saw Iserbyt launching it again on the climb after Van Toerenhout had tried a bit. Sweeck looked to stall a bit, but eventually came back, and then I really knew, oh whoa, Sweeck is super good today. And I think he did the almost perfect race until we came to the final lap. There he was in a very tricky position once again, but yeah, I don't know how you see that in the final lap. Was there anything he could have done different? Because he eventually lost that sprint, whilst he's normally the faster sprinter on paper against Iserbyt.
To be honest, when they went into the last corner, that was what I thought. But going back to that last lap, I think before the descent and the descent itself, I think he played it well, because Iserbyt was the one in the last lap that that tried to attack with a headwind entering that last lap. Then in the descent, he made sure that he was in second position. Van Toerenhout tried it on the inside, and where he also tapped his back wheel, but he was able to stay in second. And then he was able to follow Iserbyt also on the steep hill, one of the tricky parts of the course. And I think in the end, the mistake, in my opinion, maybe that he made, but it's always tricky because he also doesn't want to have Van Toerenhout come back because he was dropped on that hill. But maybe he should have been a little bit easier on the pace on before the pit zone, entering that Stone Edge section in a way. I think if he maybe was a bit safer on his energy, you never know. But Iserbyt was well placed in that sprint, and from behind it's difficult to counter such a sprint.
I do think Sweeck could have done it differently, but on another way, as you are saying. I understand his decision to pace in the final lap, attack up that climb, because 1, he wants to keep Van Toerenhout behind. 2, by making it a long sprint, it's about who's the strongest, and Sweeck probably thought he was the strongest, which I can understand, seeing the situation he is in. However, he should have waited with launching his sprint. The sprint in Fayetteville was downhill, so you have extra draft effect, headwind, even more draft effect. Sweeck is 2 times the size of Iserbyt. We could barely see Iserbyt on the camera over front view. So he should have waited. He shouldn't have launched before the corner. He should have waited. Maybe Iserbyt would have gone first, but Sweeck with the explosiveness should have been able to, counter that initial launch by Iserbyt. And then I think Sweeck would have been able to win. He should have waited until the corner, and then, if he takes the downhill a bit slower, the launch effect that Iserbyt has from going from behind, because he was a length behind, could close that gap, is gone. And if it happens that way, then Sweeck has a chance. But we don't need to forget, Iserbyt took the win, and fair play to him, he took it. So what did you think about Iserbyt's race, Issam?
Indeed, the winner, and with a tactically played it well, I guess, together with Van Toerenhout. Props to them for playing the team tactics that they did during the race. And at the end of the day, you have to be there, eh? And I think that Sweeck was very good, but Iserbyt was also up there. Like you said, I think he was not as he was in Waterloo. I think in Waterloo he was a little better, but that can happen. And yeah, I think his race overall, he tried with Van Toerenhout several times, looking behind, making sure that Van Toerenhout was in between. Can be annoying at times, but that is the way they play it, and it was also very tricky, risky in a way. But eventually, he was always thinking about his next move, and that's also important in a race as tactically as it was today. And he played it well. He was behind in the sprint, and especially if you have a lot of speed there, it's a bit easier with the draft to get around. And he played that perfectly.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Iserbyt was the strongest today, but he did get that win. It's deserved. He really gave it his everything. Enough about the team tactics. Let's talk about the things that Iserbyt did. What did you think about the moves that Iserbyt made this race? We saw him make 2 aggressive moves on Toon van der Bos, both after this man-made bridge after the barriers into the corner around the tree. What's your thought on that move, or especially the second one, which was more aggressive than the first one?
If you know Iserbyt a little bit, those are the moves that he makes. He loves to make. He's the type of guy that dives bomb you at the last minute in a corner, and you have almost no time to react up on that, And that was the same with Van der Bos. I think Van der Bos wasn't really aware where Iserbyt was at that moment, and Iserbyt, as he always does, is when he thinks he's ahead, that's his corner, and he's going to take that corner the way he wants to. In a way it works, because I think there were definitely some moves that he made during the race as well, which were, first of all, critical, and second of all, you have to be there at the moment when it's going to happen. So, for example, with a Sweeck that didn't make those moves in lap 7, when you are a bit behind, then you're sitting in a situation where you have to pace and to get back to the back in front. And I hope it goes well for him in the next coming races. But it's the risk element is, for me, I wouldn't be racing like that. You just put yourself in a position every time. It's when they see Iserbyt behind them, is, oh, there he goes again, there he's coming. And it's going to irritate some riders, I think, over the course of a season if you do it more and more. And you should just be a little bit careful, I think, with those moves.
I 100% agree there. If you keep doing this, which he is, last year, remember, Merckxplas, when he had this incident with Toon Aerts was not happy about it. Keeps happening. He also had this deviation in the sprint in Nieuw against Aerts. Aerts, again, not happy about it. Aerts ultimately got his revenge, I think, in Besançon by putting out his leg, and that's, of course, not something you should be doing either way. And then Aerts said, oh, well, yellow card. Well, I'm not too sure about that, but that's a long time ago. If we look at what happens now, the second incident was the most aggressive. He comes off the bridge and chooses a straight line towards the small bend before the corner. He completely ignores that Toon van der Bos is next to him, and in my opinion, you have to leave the space there for Toon van der Bos. Van der Bos needs to get his shoulder out to avoid barging into a tree. Van der Bos was completely shocked by that and ultimately sat up right after the corner. So I think, indeed, as you say, riders will get annoyed. The same goes for these team tactics. If you keep doing it, not only riders, also fans will get annoyed if you do it at every opportunity. Not just once or twice, but today it was really after every corner. It's just a factor of irritation that keeps building. And if we look at the UCI rules, they got modified for this season. This season, above the rules that they had, that insult, threats and inappropriate behavior were punished by a fine. They added that act of violence amongst riders or any other person results in a disqualification and 200 Schreiber franc fine. And the obstruction by a rider in order to prevent or delay the movement of another rider also results in a disqualification and 100 franc fine. In my opinion, these rules are in perfect UCI fashion. Nobody knows what they mean exactly. And if you take them very literally, it happens in every race. In every race, there will be contact. Is that then an act of violence? In every race, there will at some point be an obstruction by a rider in order to prevent the delay or movement of another rider. We saw, for instance, in Kruijbeke when Kant got the bike out in the final lap against Clauzel. Is that then immediately a disqualification, or do we only go for serious acts of violences, like when Ton Aerts got his leg out in Besançon? There's no clear rule on this, and based on the standards set by the UCI, I don't think there should be any punishment against Iserbyt, but it's just something you should be careful with. It is what it is, and we'll see. I don't think that at the end of the day it was a very big deal in the race. It's just something that we should keep an eye on and see how it evolves throughout the rest of the season. Maybe Iserbyt was just pissed that he needed to chase Toon van der Bos twice and thought, well, this is my way to react it or whatever. Let's run down our entire top 10 then. Iserbyt took his second win of this World Cup series ahead of Laurens Sweeck and Michael van Toerenhout. Fourth place was for Eric Brunner ahead of Thibau Nys and Daan Soete. Then we find in the final places of the top 10 3 Belgians. Niels van der Putten ahead of Joran Wieseuren and Toon van der Bos. And the 10th place goes to a rider from the Czech Republic, Michael Boros. Well, Issam, I think it's pretty clear who we're going to talk about now.
The surprise from America? No, but...
Of course, Eric Brunner, getting the best ever American World Cup result after Jeremy Powers got 6th in the Vegas Cross in 2015, but 4th place today. Of course, we knew he had something in his legs. We knew that he was good. We knew that this course kind of suited him. We knew that he was in good form in the USCX series. We knew that he should have gotten a top 10 last week, but 4th, wow, man, that's really above expectation.
Definitely above expectations. I mean, everything within the top 10 was already good for him. With the starting field that we had today, I think most guys were here. So I think we only missed Van der Haar in a way and Ronhaar in the first lap that broke his chain. But he played it well. He was in that group. He didn't really mix in the beginning, and then later on he started to also close the gaps even. We had the 3 that went away with Sweeck, Iserbyt and Van Toerenhout, and then you had the group behind with the likes of Wieseuren and Nys and also Brunner, and he went away from there, was almost able to bridge that gap to the 3 in front because they were kind of looking at each other. But overall, like really solid race, and like you said, you know, this season already he has shown some good races, and it's I think for him it's just a confirmation that he is in a very good form, and definitely a boost for him. Also internationally, I mean, you know, those sponsors are looking right now. You can put it in your resume at top 5 in the World Cup. I think that's definitely something that that will bring some eyeballs to the sport and for him in personal as well.
Yeah, I really hope he is able to keep developing like this, get some good results in Europe, hopefully a top 10 at the World Championships, and then indeed, as you say, hopefully at some point there will be a Belgian team or a Dutch team or just some sponsor that picks him up and is like, hey, come over, we'll get you to race an entire season in Europe if you want. That would be amazing, and I still think it's a bit far-fetched. It's been a long time since the Dutch and Belgian sponsors have been interested in any non-Dutch or Belgian riders. If there's any team interested in it, I might say it would be the Tormans Cross team. They have a bit of an international approach. I think we see somewhat of an international agenda in the Krelan team, I would say. Of course, they have a lot of Belgian and Dutch riders there, but in their umbrella with the Alpecin team and the 777 team, I think that could maybe work. But that's just speculation. For now, Eric Brunner should really take this opportunity and just enjoy this 4th position, and I don't know what's next. I don't think he will be coming to Europe anytime soon, staying there for Pan Ams, I assume. But if we look at the rest of the top 10, some other very nice results. Thibau Nys getting another 5th place, bit more anonymous than last week, but he rode the perfect race in my opinion. Didn't do much work, then relied on his sprint. Don't think there was more in it for him, but a strong ride by the under 23 rider. Soete, Van der Putten, Van der Bos, kind of where we expect them. Wieseuren finally getting a good race under his belt, but finally in the 10th place we also see Michael Boros, which was a nice, somewhat surprise. Did you expect him in the top 10?
Hard to say, to be honest, not really, but yeah, eventually he was one of the last survivors of that group. Eventually was not able to follow, and then maintained that 10th place and hold off Ruek, who was actually able last week to get in the top 10. That was only able to get 11th. And in the end, the position where he was in, and he was able to get that top 10 in the end.
Let's go and talk about the women's race then. Helene Clauzel had the fastest start, but she was very quickly overtaken by Denise Betsema. Denise Betsema upped the pressure and started to, open a gap together with Inge van der Heijden. And at that moment we could see in the corner of our screen that Zeynep Carmen Alvarado, the number 2 of last week in Waterloo, had a mechanical issue. She fell back. She was, I think, in 14th position, or at least 15, 16 seconds down. And Betsema kept applying the pressure, and together with Inge van der Heijden they opened a small gap, but eventually they got caught again by Van Empel, Lucinda Brandt, who had a good start. Clauzel was there, Vorst was there, and after 2 laps Alvarado also joined them at the front. But just as she had joined them, at the bottom of the steep climb she had a mechanical issue again. That was really the Waterloo for Alvarado. She would not be able to return to the front of the race despite some first attempts to do so. We eventually went to a situation where we had 3 riders in the lead in the final lap. Lucinda Brandt attacked, Van Empel was able to follow, and Vorst came back. We went to a sprint with these 3 riders, and Brandt, she knew that she had to do something to beat Van Empel, as Van Empel is the bit faster rider of the 2. In the Stonehenge section, Vorst, who was riding for a podium, was overtaken, and Brandt hoped to be able to use Vorst as a human obstacle. Van Empel, however, kept cool and won the sprint ahead of Brandt and Annemarie Vorst. 2 out of 2 wins for Van Empel in the World Cup. Brandt ended 2nd and Vorst 3rd. Issam, in the preview podcast that I recorded with Caleb Swartz, I said that I thought Brandt would be in a similar scenario as at the World Championships. She would be tied up with a rider, in this case Van Empel, who was roughly as strong on the normal course, but simply had a better sprint. Do you agree with the assessment that eventually also turned out to be the scenario in the race?
Yeah, eventually. I think that one of the main differences was that we were not with a 1v1 situation where Alvarado was kind of then at the Worlds kind of coming back and trying something. But now we had a couple of women that were able to follow. But in the end, it was quite obvious who were the stronger women out of the group, and Vorst was, in my opinion, kind of a surprise that she was able to follow the 2 and able to close that down. And I think, for Brandt, when you're in a scenario like right now with the Van Empel and you have to go to a sprint, it's always, I think it's almost traumatizing that you have to go with someone so fast with such a sprint. And I think that Brandt tried several tricks, and definitely in the last lap with having Vorst, she utilized that very well. And I think Van Empel was panicking a little bit. Then when she went off with the sprint, it was the rocket ship wasn't launched, and she was able to get by both of them.
Yeah, I think Van Empel was clearly the strongest and best today. I think that she was so easy in the wheel of Brandt that there was really no debate about it. I think she could have won solo, because I didn't mention it in my summary, but the most interesting part of the race, at least for me, was the fact that she was bunny hopping the barriers. Yes, these barriers were no 40 centimeters. They were, I think, around 28 centimeters, what I heard from the people on course. So that means that they are not the normal height that you see in Belgium. But that doesn't matter, because she was jumping them and she was the only one to do so. She did this in the 2nd lap, then in the penultimate lap and the final lap. In the penultimate lap, she opened a serious gap by doing so, which Brandt needed to close. It's interesting to see. I will give some background info that I got from one of our listeners on site. She was jumping them in practice yesterday. She was in the wheel of Van Toerenhout and Iserbyt, and every lap she was jumping them. And she kept doing it better and better, faster and faster. And ultimately she did it in the race at pretty high speed. I think it was interesting that she did it in the 2nd lap, penultimate lap and final lap. Maybe, if I needed to pull a trick, I would have waited for the last lap, gone in first, and then everybody expects you to walk and you just jump them and open a serious gap and you're gone. Now your surprise effect was gone. You could see Brandt was coming into the barriers in first, knowing what would happen, trying to semi-block Van Empel, and the surprise effect was gone. It doesn't matter because Van Empel has a very good sprint, but that would have been something interesting. But I think it's super nice to see that more and more women are jumping the barriers. Yes, maybe not at 40 centimeters as Buck Pieterse is able to do and Van Alphen, but she is able to do it at a bit lower height. And of course it's nice to see that she does so being supported on the day of practice by Iserbyt and Van Toerenhout. It's really a team effort and I enjoyed it, but ultimately maybe you can give your thought, but I think maybe I'm looking too much into it because it was just exciting to see, but it's not the decisive factor in the race due to the sprint that Van Empel has.
No, like for the end result, it was not decisive, but I think like mentally, it's it's not funny if you're going to be running over the barriers and then you have someone jumping them, and it was 3 seconds what she was having, and even the last time when she was behind them, jumped the barriers, and then Brand still had to close down like 5 seconds or something. That's definitely not something where you're waiting for in the last lap, and I think that that it was very nice to see. But I don't think that Van Empel really wanted to get away. I think she tried it once or twice, but it was like half efforts in a way, and she was quite comfortable and happy and content to sit in the wheel of Brand and just wait for that sprint. And she played it tactically almost well until that part where she was not able to pass Vorst and was in third wheel. And then, of course, you try around the outside, the longer way around. That is obviously not going to work. And then there was, I think, slight panic, but she managed it very well. And, one thing, though, what I was thinking about was what we see right now is with these type of barriers, she's able to jump them, and I think there are definitely some that are able to do it. I think Pieterse should be able to jump them as well, probably. But
yeah, easily. I was in Oosterwijk today. The planks there were 40 centimeters. I think effectively you were jumping over a bit lower because they were like 3-4 centimeters in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But Pieterse can jump over 40 centimeters, and Pieterse can jump faster than Van Empel. We see the Van Alphen and K jumping. They are also able to jump 40 centimeter, but not as quick as Pieterse. I've seen riders in the youth, Meka Baka, 15 years old, jumping over 40 centimeters, 2 planks, 40 centimeters today, at the same pace as Buck Pieterse, maybe even faster. There are 12, 13-year-old girls who are also jumping planks of 33 centimeters. It's the future. In the future, everyone is going to be jumping, and it's good that Van Empel is already practicing and that there's improvements on her side and that she's able to do it when they are a bit lower. Which, I mean, I will let you continue in a bit, but I'm quite intrigued by women jumping barriers, and it brings me back to a couple of years ago when we were in Boom for the Super Prestige race, when they came with this innovation of having planks of 20 centimeters for women's and then 40 for the men's race to try and encourage women to jump the barriers. And on those 20 centimeter planks, we saw Vorst jumping. We saw a couple of others jumping as well. I still think that would be fun, but ultimately this also shows that even if you have the same height, women can jump the barriers just as the men can.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, but that was basically what I wanted to ask, because obviously it happened already in a couple of races where they changed it for the men's and the women's race. But I think, like, is that with the regulation? Is it in line with the regulation? Because you're gonna
No, because that's the thing. What happened after Boom? The men and women need to race the exact same course, so you're not allowed to take out an obstacle or change it, which I think is a bit dubious. Because yes, I understand that you want to have them on the same standards, but like, I think it would only encourage women to jump the barriers if they can start at like 20 or 30 centimeters, because for a rider like Brand, for instance, who has already put a lot of work in her technique compared to a couple of years ago, we know that Brand has improved a lot technically under Sven Nys, but bunyhopping is still a big issue. And like, what's the point of Brand to learn to bunyhop at this age? Because there's no way she's going to make it to 40 centimeters. But if the barrier is at 20 centimeters for some of the races, then it's worth trying, because then you don't need to go all the way to 40. And from personal experience, 20 centimeters or 40 centimeters is a world of difference. I was always able to jump like between 15 and 25 centimeters, but higher I just couldn't do it. And I think it would boost the cycling on the women's side, the technique, but On the other hand, if you look at the riders that are coming through now, and there's riders that are already doing 40 centimeters in the youth categories, then maybe it's a non-issue, and in a couple of years we're going to see plenty of riders jumping the highest barriers as well.
Yeah, amen. Let's hope so, because I think that the reward, as we saw today, is definitely there, especially if you are, like with the men's category right now, we see that most of them are able to jump most heights of the barriers in a way when they get on 40. We have some guys that are not jumping them. I think one of them, definitely Van der Haar, that's still having those issues with the barriers. But I think that with the women's category, definitely when you have only a few that are able to jump them, I think the reward is way higher, as you have seen today. So yeah, I just hope that that we see an increase in that department, and hopefully we will see more and more in this trend, getting bigger and bigger. Like you said, the youth is already learning and practicing and doing it, so that's looking very hopeful for the future, and I'm looking forward to that.
Let's run down the entire top 10 then. Van Empel taking the win. 4 out of 4 wins for Paul Sauze in the United States. Successful campaign for them. Brand ends second, and I think that was the maximum achievable as said. Worst also maximized the result. She was riding for a podium in the final phase of the race and ends third. Denise Betsema ended fourth ahead of Inger van der Heijden and Ceyin del Carmen Alvarado. 7th place was for Helene Clausel ahead of Clara Honsinger, Manon Bakker and Austin Killips. I want to talk about Denise Betsema briefly. I liked what I saw from Betsema today. Taking initiative in the early phases of the race. Maybe that was eventually what cost her in the end and made her lose that third spot on the podium to Worst. But I liked what I saw. I saw improvements on the side of Betsema once again. Every week it's getting a bit better and a bit better. Today was not a course for Betsema. Betsema needs a bit of mud, and that will be coming in the coming weeks. And then I think we'll see Betsema a bit more able to fight for the win rather than for the third spot on the podium. But overall, I liked what I saw from Betsema. Good result. She can take some momentum forward. She always seems to like the travel to the States, really enjoying the experience. So I'm interested to see what Denise Betsema will be doing in the next couple of weeks. Maybe Rudderford can be a course for her.
I definitely agree with that. I think it was quite promising what we saw from Betsema, especially the earlier part of the race. I thought that she would have been able to be a bit closer to Worst, Brand and Van Empel, but in the end, 4th place after what she did in the race was definitely a good result. And it's not her parkour in a way, like you pointed out already. So I think that's definitely heading in the right direction. And for the next coming races, if it's going to be a little bit more muddy and not this fast-paced races, then it's definitely going to be something for her more, and she will then be looking maybe even to the top steps of the podium. I think for Alvarado, who we have seen in Waterloo almost snatching the win from Van Empel, now also was looking quite good, but then having those 2 mechanical issues, looked something with the chain, or at least not being able to get it in gear. That obviously didn't help. But what I loved about what she was doing during the race was, even though she kept having these issues, she was going on with the race, trying to make sure that she was at least finishing well in the points. And I think that was definitely, I don't know what the lap times exactly were, but it looked, from my side, it looked quite positive. I don't know how you experienced that race from Alvarado.
Alvarado definitely did a good race, was able to keep up with the pace of at least Denise Betsema throughout most of the race, despite those mechanical issues. Put in, I think, the fastest lap of the race No, it was not the fastest lap. Ultimately, the final lap was faster by Van Empel and Brand, but still a good lap time by Alvarado. It's a shame, but there was definitely more in it today for her without the mechanicals. But it's unfortunately part of the sport, and she should be happy about her trip here. Hopefully she takes the jet lag well, and we'll see her up front next week in Tabor. I think for the rest of the top 10, not that much interesting to say, to be honest. Bakker, kind of where we expect her. Honsinger, kind of where we expect her on a fast course, but she did have a good start this week. Killips, new name in the top 10, but behind that, I mean, the riders that she beats, it's also kind of where we would expect her, seeing the performances of the last couple of weeks. I'm really looking forward to the World Cup in Tabor next week, when Puk Pietersen will be at the start. Kata, Blanka, Vash also at the start. They raced in Oosterwijk today, where I was. It was a pretty interesting race for the first half. Pietersen was in a leading group with Vos and Bentveld. Eventually, after the halfway point of the race, Pietersen really had enough, opened the gap and quite comfortably took the win over Kata, Blanka, Vos. Pietersen, we know, has the weapon of jumping the barriers. I already said she jumped over 2 planks of 40 centimeters every lap today. Next week in Tabor, let's see if she can finish it off. Will be difficult, but I'm looking forward to it. Kata, Blanka, Vos, I spoke to her after the finish, and you can hear to what she has to say about the race today and her upcoming program the rest of the coming weeks right now. Blanka, a second place for you today here in Oosterwijk. Was that the maximum achievable for you today?
Yes, I think. This was my first race. I had a few races in Czech, but it was a little bit race with myself. But now I was really on the limit and made some mistake at the technical part, but I felt strong, so I think I'm satisfied with the result.
So next week you are racing Tabor. What is your goal there?
Yes, yeah, we will see, but if I finish in the top 5, it would be really nice. So this is my goal.
And after Tabor, what's the rest of your program?
Yeah, before Tabor I have a race in Ardoi, and then after Tabor the race what is at the night.
In Woerden?
Yes.
And after that, are you going towards the European Championship?
Yes, and yeah, I have also a race in Maasmechelen, and yeah, we have also some World Cup before another World Cup before the Europeans.
Yeah, that should be Maasmechelen and maybe Ruddervoorde, the Super Prestige?
No, I think I don't start there. No.
Well, thank you so much and congratulations with your second place.
Thank you.
Then we also had Mari Schreiber taking place in the race in Oosterwijk. She once again had the fastest start, almost becoming a Gerben de Knecht type starter. She ultimately faded a bit, but she is also racing her first World Cup of the season in Tabor next week. Let's hear what she had to say after the race. Marie, today you had the fastest start. What happened after that?
I just didn't feel great in the second lap. I had some stomach problems, so I had to slow down a bit. But yeah, my start was great. I kind of hoped that I could hold on to this pace, but yeah, I just didn't have a great second lap.
You've been doing quite some of the smaller non-televised races here in Europe. How's that been going so far?
I think it's been great so far. I had a good start to the season. Always been in the top 10 so far, which is good for the morale. And yeah, I like it to do sometimes the smaller races.
Next week, the World Cup in Tabor, are you going to start there?
Yes, of course. It's one of my favorite tracks, so I'll be there.
And what's going to be your goal in that race?
Last year I did a top 20, so I hope I can do at least as good as last year or even better.
And do you think that's possible based on the form?
I think so, yeah. I had some good training weeks, so I think from now on it will only get upwards, so I think we'll be fine.
The men's race in Oosterwijk then was won by Ryan Kamp. He attacked just over halfway point of the race from a big group. From that big group, ultimately Jens Adam secured second place ahead of Wietse Meeuwse. More racing in Europe, Kevin Kuhn taking the win in Steinmauer ahead of Anton Ferdinand and Finn Treutler. The women's race was won by one of my personal favorites, Lynn Burquier. Don't know when she is really starting the high-level cross races, but she beat Sara Casasola and Perrine Clausel today. In Spain, Kevin Suarez Fernandez took the win ahead of Felipe Orts and Luc Verburg. The women's race was won by Lucia Gonzalez Blanco ahead of Isia Zontone and Laura Verdonschot. Double cross weekend in Sweden. Arne Baars took the win ahead of Koen van Dijken and David Eriksson today. Yesterday, Arne Baars also took the win ahead of David Eriksson and Henrik Jansson. There was racing in Klommel where Toby Barnes from our own Garden Shed team took the win ahead of Ben Chilton and Jensen Young, also from our team. The women's race was won by Anna Kay ahead of Xan Kreese and Libby Bell, a junior woman, also from our team. Racing in Slovakia as well this weekend. Zdenek Stybar took the win today ahead of Wart Huijps and Marek Konwa. Yesterday that result was the other way around, as Wout Huijps took the win ahead of Zdeněk Štibar and Steppe Rombouts. The women's race there was won both days by Kristina Zemanova ahead of Pavla Havlikova and Marte Truide. Finally, to round off this block of European racing, Felipe Ort took the win yesterday in Spain ahead of Maschiarelli and Wout Vervoort. The women's race yesterday was won by Laura Verdonschot ahead of Sofia Rodriguez-Revert and Carlotta Borello. Quite some racing in Europe. Issam, next week we go to Tabor. Are you looking forward to that race?
Definitely. If it's going to be a dry race, we might be looking in the same type of racing that we have seen today and also last week in a way. And in that case, I'm definitely excited to see what's going to happen. We get some people back that we were missing on the starting field. Van der Haar with the men's category. Obviously, Vos will be starting in the women's category. Buck Petersen. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what's that going to bring for in terms of racing. And Tabor is a classic in a way, in my opinion, and is definitely something that I hope will stay in cyclocross forever. Who knows? But it's an iconic race, and it's a race that I cherish, that I love, and that helps in the view of the internationalization that cyclocross is aiming for. So definitely a race that I'm looking forward to.
I can confirm that this week leading up to the World Cup in Tabor, we will be having an interview with the best Czechish women's rider at the moment, Kristina Zemanova, the national champion. She will be giving her thoughts on the race and her season as well as her future. And then in Tabor, I will actually be present, so the podcast might be one day later as we are driving back overnight, so I don't know if it's possible for me to record there, but I'm looking forward to that trip as well. For now, Issam, thank you for joining me late at night once again.
Yes, no worries, thank you, and hopefully the last time, I think, that we're doing this late.
Yeah, you never know, but anyway, thanks everyone for listening. Issam, thank you again for being here. Stay tuned on our Instagram and Twitter for some nice behind-the-scenes content of Tabor with the Eurocross Academy as well. So see you guys after Tabor, or well, actually in the lead up to Tabor still with Kristina Zemanova. See you guys then. Goodbye.